second that?
I'll second that.
All right, we've got one item on our agenda prior to getting into our work session, and that is request approval to proceed to public hearing on an IR text amendment.
Yes.
Linda?
Good afternoon. So yes, before we break into our work session, we're here before you to request to go to public hearing for the Industrial Restricted District for brewery's text amendment. If you recall, you received a letter from Schaefer and Schaefer on December 21st requesting the text amendment to the IR zone to allow for breweries. You forwarded this text amendment for Planning Commission's recommendation. Planning Commission was presented with the recommendation on February 6th with the proposed amendment. And on Tuesday, February 19th, the Planning Commission forwarded their recommendation to you all, which you have in front of you, for your consideration to forward to public hearing. So before you, Chapter 158, zoning regulations, here's the proposed text for the IR district to allow brewery and microbrewery. This was presented by Kelly Schaefer at our Planning Commission meeting, and she and the applicant are here today if you have any additional questions. But very much like the original proposal that was sent to you on December 21st, it is for the allowance of breweries or microbreweries, provided that such operation shall be in compliance with any and all local and state liquor laws and licensing requirements and health department regulations, and shall possess any and all licenses which may be required by Carroll County and or the state of Maryland. And then also, it allows for accessory uses under E1D. The following when associated with a brewery or microbrewery and pursuant to section 158.079 C2S, that would allow for tasting rooms, accessory food sales to accompany the beverage tasting, retail sale facility for the sale of novelty and gift items related to the beverage, guided tours, and promotional activities. So Planning Commission had discussions on Tuesday regarding this, and was in agreement with what was presented to them. Some of the concerns that staff had when we had our original conversation with Planning Commission, and that's in the proposal that you have in front of you for the I-1 district, is that limitation of 49% for the accessory uses. And again, the thought was that that's more in the commercial realm, and that the zoning administrator needed some threshold to differentiate between industrial and commercial. But after Planning Commission had much discussion, they felt that that was unnecessary given the nature of breweries and microbreweries, and felt that there should be no limitations on that floor area.
Let me just jump in. Appreciate the rundown. Tuesday it was a very good discussion. It was presented very well by both staff and those that presented us, that were in front of us at the Plan and Zoning Commission. Amongst the Plan and Zoning Commission, a lot of discussion on the numbers associated with, this type of activity and how it should be zoned. At the end of the day, at the end of the discussion, we came to the conclusion that we should not overregulate and be in addition to regulatory guidelines and direction given by federal and state that's already in place. Why add another level of bureaucracy or regulatory guidelines? And I shared that. Those were my thoughts. I thought it was discussed well and thorough. And what you see in front of you was the final piece that was recommended from the Planning and Zoning Commission. But key is that there are already laws, regulatory guidelines that are in place, federal, state, and we should not just keep adding additional layers on top of it. So that's my biggest concern. So.
Any other? You good?
No, I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions, concerns with this? I mean, I certainly don't have any. I think everyone knows how I feel about this growing industry, and I think we need to do all that we can to assist them, because it's bringing a lot of tax dollars into our jurisdiction for good reasons. And, you know, you gotta be careful here, because certainly it's about the alcohol, but it's about small business creating a great opportunity. And I know I referenced the two young guys in Tawnytown that are attempting to open theirs. It's whether you agree or disagree with it, it's a growing industry that we need to embrace, and I think this is a good way to do it, so. All right.
I'll make the motion that the Board of County Commissioners proceed with the public hearing and proposed text amendment to the IR zone district allowing breweries.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, and with that, we can move then into our work session. Don't think we need to do anything procedurally, do we, Roberta? To move from one to the other?
Nope.
Okay. So, Linda, I would assume you're gonna pick up where we left off, or give us a review, I suppose,
Yes.
where we are, so,
Oh,
okay.
I think I forgot to pass that out too. Wait. So in front of you, and I apologize, the one piece of paper I did not hand out because you need more paper, are the notes from February 12th.
You must not like trees.
No, you know, well, we're keeping the tree industry in business, right? So again, last time we met was February 12th, and on February 12th, we talked about a recap of the January 22nd meeting. We went through the bulk requirements. We talked about business park language and added language to clarify the 20% of the land area. I think that's what our main issues were that we covered. We actually made it through the entire text. So you've reviewed everything in its entirety once over. Staff went back and we have a couple things that we need to complete for some of our outstanding issues, which we'll talk about today. And that's reconciling the text amendment, which you just forwarded to public hearing, with the existing language that we have. Medical cannabis and its proximity to schools, and Tom's GIS staff prepared some maps so you could see what a 1,000-foot buffer looks like around the C2 and C3, and what a 500-foot buffer would look like, just in case you wanted to look to alter any of that. We thought that would be helpful. We have information on yard requirements for industrial districts, and a recommendation for the phasing of the residential component of the business park. Also today, we'll recap our meeting with the hospital that we had last week. And if you are agreeable to everything that we've presented and the changes that you all want to make today, we would like to ask for your endorsement of this preliminary draft zoning code that's in front of you. And if there are any changes, we can also do that and still post it. And then what we'd like to do is make that available to the public, post it on our website, and then talk about next steps for procedures for text adoption, if we want to grandfather projects in process, and public outreach meetings. So that's what we have on tap for today. So with that, I'll have Mary go over with you the text that she's prepared.
Okay, we're gonna go a little out of order. It's probably easier just to follow this new text along. Anything you see highlighted are still issues that are unresolved in your discussions. So if you go to the first 2 pages, the definitions of brewery, distillery, and then 2 pages later than that, limited distillery and microbrewery. That's to reconcile what we had originally with what you just sent to public hearing. So we changed the definitions of brewery and microbrewery, and then similarly, we changed distillery and limited distillery. So we're no longer going to call them small scale. We'll go with the state references to them. That's yours. And all 4 of those are exactly the same, other than what class they refer to.
Makes sense.
So.
Where's the extras?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so the next time time you'll see highlighting is on page 10.
I apologize. With the highlighting, do you want us to agree to this as we move along with what's highlighted? That's,
Sure, you can do it that
I
way,
mean-
unless you want to wait till the end.
well, if we go to, if we go to the end, then we're gonna go right back to the beginning
Okay.
to start, so
Well,
if
why
we.
don't we question if you have anything on these particular pieces and then accept it as a whole at the end, instead of doing each
No,
one?
that's fine. I don't
Do
want.
that?
Sure. I'm comfortable with that, I mean.
Yeah, okay. So is there any questions on the brewery? I mean, that makes sense based on what we
Right.
just decided, so.
Yeah, it's gonna go to public hearing anyway, correct?
Correct.
That language is on.
Correct, yes.
Right.
It's the same language.
Right.
Okay.
The next thing at the top of page 10 is the language that's currently in the code about the 1,000 feet distance between medical cannabis dispensary, processor, or grower. And as you'll recall, at the last meeting, you amended the use table to allow dispensaries in the C2 and
You have C2 and
C2
C3.
and
and
C3.
three.
And in conjunction
In
with.
conjunction with growers and processors, if they're in the industrial. And you had asked that we bring you back information regarding how many properties would be affected by this 1,000-foot
Right.
restriction.
So this is the map that was prepared, and I'll pass these around. These are just blown-up versions of the areas that have probably the most impact. So since you're on map, but, I mean, really, the Freedom area along 26 probably has the most impact with regards to the 1,000-foot and the 500-foot buffer. Very little outside the Manchester area. You know, Manchester and Hampstead have a lot of county inholdings with the municipality kind of surrounding them. So there's a couple small places here within the 500-foot buffer and the 1,000-foot buffer of the schools. Again, north of Manchester as well, there's a school with some C2 surrounding it. Coming down to the Finksburg area, 500-foot doesn't have any effect. Once you get to the 1,000-foot, then there's some C2 properties that would be eliminated. In the Westminster area, yes, there's some C2 and C3 properties in the 500-foot that would be affected. So anything affected in the 500, obviously affected in the 1,000-foot buffer as well. But then we get to the western portion of the county, and according to our data information, nothing is affected in those areas, given where the schools are in relationship to those future potential districts. In the Winfield area, the 1,000-foot buffer does affect a little bit of C2. And then again, coming down to the Freedom area, several sites along 26 and 32 would be eliminated at both the 500-foot and the 1,000-foot level.
And if you look at it numerically, there's roughly 1,400 acres of C2 and C3, and the remaining lands, after you take out the 1,000 feet, is basically 1,000 acres, and if you take out the 500 feet, it's 12, almost 1,300. So it's not quite as effective as I thought it was gonna be when I started this committee.
And Tom, you had a 400-foot under chapter 158 as well, distance requirement that was from the residential you wanted to mention.
Well, in the code, it actually.
Yes.
There is, the previous page, on page 9, if you look at that, that's under the distance requirement section.
It's in the struck out.
No.
No,
it's
it's
not?
up above that, under C
Oh,
and D.
sorry.
Under C and D. Or actually D, excuse me, D. Or B.
B.
Or B, I'm sorry. B. It actually mentions the dispensaries and the growing, and the processing under B. And it says 2 times the distance requirement, which would be 400 feet, correct, Jay? And then if you look right above that, under A, under 3, it's any lot occupied by a school, religious established institution. So we actually now, the way the code is written now, have a conflict. Because under the medical cannabis section, it says 1,000 feet, and under this distance requirements section, it actually is 400 feet. So,
This would be the-
Under this section here, for these other things that are listed, my guess is there's a reason for odor or something that's being done there, or noise or something, why it'd have to be an additional distance away, is that correct?
that's correct, yes.
Okay, what's the reasoning behind moving medical cannabis 1,000 feet away, or 500? Do we have any requirements for a pharmacy like that?
Well, it's in the existing code now, so.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I know,
Right.
but I'm looking for rationale. There's no rationale, there's no, it's not something that says a pharmacy has to be 500 feet or 1,000 feet away from a school.
Correct. That's correct.
I don't
What's the
see the
state?
difference.
I think that was determined by the Board of Commissioners at the time the medical
Yeah, I know.
cannabis legislation went through, and there
I was
was no.
overruled, so, anyway.
What are the state
That's the answer.
Well,
Commissioner.
and just to be clear, I think what Tom's talking about is there's already a conflict as our
Right.
code sits, because
Right.
the commissioners added that 1,000 feet specifically for cannabis, but they also have in sections B here, cannabis with other,
Right.
Yeah, so one of them had,
One-
right.
one's gotta go, so to speak,
Right,
or
right, we gotta
change.
correct
Right.
it. Well, we gotta have to correct
Or
it one
both
way or
of them
another.
can go.
Right.
Well, that's up to you.
Yeah, I'm just saying, there's no reason, there's no requirement that either one, correct? There's no requirement that it has to be 400 feet or 500 or
Correct.
1,000.
Yeah, that
Because
wasn't
if we have
anything
a-
part of the
Right,
state
no,
law.
Right.
that was self-imposed.
Right, I mean, if we have a pharmacy, it can be right next to a school. If you're looking at this as medical cannabis, and that's what we're looking at is, and there is a prescribed use for this, and it's prescribed by a doctor, and all the safeguards that are in place for this, you know, the structure has to be built this way, all that stuff is in there. I don't see the reason to put it, to have another restriction on it. Just my opinion, but I just don't see the reason. I mean, we allow school buildings next to dispensary, places that distribute OxyContin, which is so much more addicting than anything else that's out there, but that's okay. And if it is okay, and I'm not arguing that it is or it isn't, why isn't this?
And the argument made that this is a step away from recreational use of cannabis, I don't buy. This is medicine. Again, it's hard for me to be saying that from where, you know, we grew up in our culture, but the fact is that it is now recognized as medicine, and it should be treated as medicine. But the threat that this can turn into recreational use, and there's this, you know, sense that then it'll just be used and there's a threat there. I just, again, like Commissioner Frazier says, I don't buy it. There are so many other things that unfortunately our kids can get their hands into that are much closer in proximity and much, much more dangerous. And that concerns me, that we're treating this other than what it's designed to be, and that's a medicine. So,
State regulations? I mean, none.
No.
Not regarding separation. I mean, there's numerous.
Yes,
Security.
good
and-
clarification.
Right, there's so many
yeah.
things for security and where already, I just don't think this is necessary.
Well, you all know how I feel. And I don't agree.
I know.
So, and I'm gonna stick to it. So maybe that's why we shouldn't do this as a whole, because I'm not gonna agree to this, if that's the way you're going. Because
What do you mean
you
do it
might
as a
not
whole?
buy the whole package, because this is part of it. You know, we suggested we accept everything here instead of going by piece,
Oh,
with each of the
Okay.
highlights. But my
Well, the
argument.
the highlight's 1,000 feet right now.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
But my argument continues to be, look, I'm all about medicinal cannabis. I am, and I think and I've seen the benefits. There's no question about it. I've heard the testimony. My issue is when, not if, but when it becomes available for recreational use, then these facilities are just gonna be grandfathered in, to allow for that to happen.
Why
And I
would they
think
be?
that's wrong.
But why would they be? It's a pharmacy, it's medical.
It's not a pharmacy.
It is, it's distribution in accordance
I
with.
disagree.
But-
It's not a pharmacy.
But that's the law.
If it was a pharmacy, it'd say a
Well,
pharmacy.
The distribution is regulated by law on how it can be and will be
I
distributed.
don't want them around the kids.
Yeah, but again, in the same sense, I wouldn't want a pharmacy around kids. Kids are using things that they shouldn't be using, and they're It's the same argument. I don't understand if there's a law in place that says you are authorized to distribute medical cannabis under these reasons, and here's the cost, and here's how it's regulated, then we should enforce those laws. But to think that that's gonna be a market for recreational use, then that person is breaking the law, and they should be fined, arrested, put in jail.
What do you think a pharmacy is? Tell me what you think a pharmacy is.
What do you mean, a pharmacy?
What's a pharmacy? Is it just a building that gives out medication?
Well, it doesn't give out anything. It,
Okay, you know what I mean. Let's not get into the, let's
No, no.
not get into the technicalities here, Commissioner.
okay, well,
My,
I'm
my,
not sure
my
what you're
point
asking.
is, what's a pharmacy?
Okay. Well,
Walgreens,
no, so I'll tell you.
CVS,
Listen, I'll tell you what I believe a pharmacy is.
okay.
I believe a pharmacy is a business or an establishment that distributes medication that's regulated by the laws on how that medicine would be distributed and sold over the counter.
And
That
just
is prescribed,
That's what
period.
you think a pharmacy is?
That part of a pharmacy, that part of medical
Okay,
distribution.
medicinal cannabis facilities are just that. That's all that they are.
Okay,
They don't sell greeting cards and candy bars and you know, hair products.
yeah, but I'm not talking about Walgreens or a pharmacy.
Well, that's
in
what a
a-
pharmacy is.
No, I'm talking about
That's
the
my
medical,
point.
I'm
These
talking about the
medicinal
medical
cannabis,
distribution.
these medicinal cannabis facilities are that's all that they are.
Right. And they.
So that's
they
where I'm
distribute
coming
it.
from,
Right.
with the ability for them to be able to just be,
I don't disagree. I'm just saying they distribute or sell their medicine in accordance with the law. That's what they're doing. And if you, not you, if we believe that there's a threat that they will then distribute that medicine as if it was recreational and for recreational use, I don't think it's the same establishment. I don't think it's the same place. I don't think they're going to be allowed to do that, and if they do it illegally, then they should be arrested. And the
of what
facility
ifs
should
there.
be shut down. But I mean, I'm, again, I do not believe we should be over-regulating, and we should be overstepping, you know, this type of an issue. I mean, it's nothing I ever thought, again, I would be looking at doing, but it is for medical use, and as you shared, for good reasons, it's regulated, it's law, you know, abiding sales. It should be focused that way, but it's not associated with recreational use.
Along that same line, I thought, what's the setback for a liquor store near a school?
None
None?
that I know of, other,
It's not in the zoning code.
not
Is it
a
in the-
separate, it would have
That's a
to meet
very
the
good
normal
point.
building setback
Well,
code,
it's
but there's
not-
nothing additional.
These are
Liquor
distribution
store.
centers, you mean they could have it
Right next
school,
door.
shopping center, and they
Sure.
could be right in that shopping center
Yeah,
then?
A
absolutely.
good example is Carroll Plaza and St. John's School right behind it.
Right. But it's sold and distributed in accordance with the law.
Yeah.
That you're 21 years old and you're able to buy, purchase, walk out.
And they're
physically with-
regulated.
And it's regulated. And if they sell it recreationally to someone, especially a kid that's underage, you better believe I want them arrested and fined and done in accordance with the law. But again, it's, that's kind of where I'm at with this. I want to just keep repeating myself.
It's a tough subject for all of us, especially being Carroll County, and we all have our constituencies to answer to. I emphasize with both Commissioner Wayne and Commissioner Rothstein's position on this. It's tough, but somewhere there needs to be a compromise reached because the times are changing. Somewhere in the middle, we need to meet on this thing.
What do you feel is the right distance, or is there any distance at all?
Well, I think Commissioner Weaver made a really good point about the alcohol. As someone who's a recovered alcoholic, I find alcohol to be far more offensive than all the drugs combined. And if you look at the health ramifications, it has a greater impact upon us. But Commissioner Wance has a good point about these things potentially turning into the legal distribution for recreational purposes and being in a location of a school. That is a major concern he has, and I think a lot of my constituents have it as well. I don't know what the answer is, but the idea of the pharmacies, because it's falling under a pharmacy, it could potentially or should potentially fall under those regulations and be reflected in how we zone this.
If it returns into recreational use, which may or may not, I think my feeling is probably will in years, then it has to be a different set of regulations and so forth for that. I
When we
don't-
cross that bridge when we
Right,
get
I don't
to
see
it.
that as the same thing as this. There's two separate issues.
And this is
And when
to,
that comes up, sorry, you already chuckled me there.
don't
When that
pause
comes up,
along.
Take a breath. Don't take a breath, right, Commissioner Weaver. Breathing. If and when that happens, you know, because then a new set of regulations will come up, and we'll have, you know, whatever board is in there, then we'll have to discuss how that's going to be handled. It's not the same thing.
I
Done.
agree.
Done?
Okay.
I agree, but it's good that Commissioner Lance has brought that up, because this is something we don't
Yeah.
have to face in the
I
future.
do
I
understand
just
that.
think, and maybe you're missing my point, you know, it's gonna be very easy for medicinal cannabis facilities to be turned into recreational facilities when the time comes, because it's just gonna be a natural step to do that.
Okay,
And that's
I
when
don't
I
agree.
disagree.
I-
That's why I disagree.
I
Because
do.
if they're set and they're settled, and listen, I'm in Annapolis and I see what happens down there. That's gonna be a very easy thing. Well, you know, let's make it recreational and we already got these places, let's just, okay, we're good.
I appreciate that argument, but bottom line is, for me, I am 100% against recreational use of marijuana. And
Well,
I understand that it may be
I think
forced.
you know that I am too.
Right, so, no, that's right, so it may be
Easy
forced,
disagreement.
it may be forced down us through the state, you know, to then allow in recreational marijuana, but I think the focus for us is the medical use of cannabis and how it should be distributed. It is not the same argument for recreational use of marijuana, which I'm 100% against, so.
Your setbacks are building to building or property line to property line?
Building to property line.
Which building to property line?
The principal building to the property line.
Okay, from the school to the property line, would that be your principal building, or from the dispensary to the property line
Well,
of the school?
if it's a setback for a dispensary, it'd be from the dispensary to the school.
Okay.
And that's how you looked at the
map.
existing,
Yeah, anything,
Right.
whatever you're setting setbacks for whatever item it could be, whether it's a house, a pharmacy, or whatever. It's always measured from the structure to whatever distance it has to be.
So that property line could be 500 feet from the property line to the school or whatever, and now they'd have to go the other way from the dispensary to there, so it could be much more than 1,000 feet, the way it is, the way you're presenting it, right? Okay.
But I think the argument's not about the,
No,
honestly,
it's-
the distance and the number, but it's about the fundamental discussion of
Do we need,
whether medical cannabis should be allowed to be zoned in the proximity of schools, and not necessarily the number, I mean, and the concern associated with that.
same as, that's what I wondered, same as alcohol, same as anything else should be?
Exactly, I agree with you.
I've asked Mike Fowler, and I haven't received an answer yet. I know there are some bills in about recreational marijuana at the moment. I don't know what they say, and I don't know what their chances are. But a couple questions that I asked real quickly is, do they indicate in those bills whether, if this comes to fruition, would the same organizations be able to dispense recreational marijuana from
Right.
the same location that they're dispensing medical? That's a question. I don't know if the bills would tell us the answer. And then the other is, I would assume,
they won't.
and maybe this is a bad assumption on my part, that there would be some kind of age restriction for
Right.
purchasing recreational marijuana if it did become legal, as there is to purchase alcohol and tobacco and other things. So just questions I'm asking Mike.
Yeah, I don't think those bills will address anything
Of
when
that.
it comes to recreation. Because if it did, that would open up a huge can of worms.
They're just saying,
Yeah.
allow it or not allow it kind of thing.
And
Gotcha.
again,
With regulations to follow. Got
This
it.
is going to public hearing, right? We're going to hear feedback from
Yes.
yeah,
people, so.
We're gonna hear feedback on what we present.
Yeah.
How are we gonna present it? We can
Right.
present it
That's it, but I'm-
or we're gonna present it with
So-
no setback, and the public can give feedback on that point. Because I think a large portion of what you're gonna hear at public hearing depends on how it's presented.
right. So based on those comments, which are good, what would be struck out on what you're suggesting, Tom? Can you just, for anybody?
In 10?
So in A or B or C or D, wherever they are.
Well, under B, you would take out item number 5, 9, and 10 would come out.
So under B, 5, which is the facility for dispensing, 9,
correct.
indoor growing,
Yes,
and 10, indoor processing.
right.
Correct.
You could put them right smack dab up against a school.
No,
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 your
no, your
1,000-foot
1,000-foot would
separation.
stay in place, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying.
Yes.
Okay,
We would take those out and leave the 1,000-foot if that's what you so choose.
okay.
Or take the 1,000 foot out, leave this in.
Leave
You
it.
could do that,
Or
and
you
then it
could
would
do
be
that.
400 feet, or you could
Right.
take all of it out, what I said, and the
Right.
yellow on the next page, and then you'd have
Give
no
nothing,
setback.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
A, B, or C, right?
Stay out.
Actually,
No,
or
that-
D, you could
understood.
take dispensary
Yeah.
out and leave growing and processing in.
Yeah.
So there's D.
We already have guidelines on this page 8, you know, identifying those 3 under B. Yeah, my recommendation would be to take out that 1,000 feet in the highlighted area, since we already have the regular, you know, our guidelines in place, and they've been in place.
Not to throw a monkey wrench in with that, because 158.059 talks about growing, processing, and dispensing. So would you just remove the 1,000 feet for the dispensing, or would you remove it for all 3?
That was our D.
That's D. yeah.
Well, growing and processing is in,
It's all in
The
here.
industrial.
Industrial, correct.
which is,
And dispensing in conjunction with.
all right, but if it's just growing and processing, now it's in industrial, are there any industrial sites that are close to schools? Or is that just a moot point?
The Clean Mill area would be
Yeah.
close
Yeah.
to Linton Springs,
And Century.
and Century
Is this-
High.
Is the stuff off Progress Way down in Oldersburg
Progress
still?
Yeah, Progress Way, yes,
Is it still
yes.
industrial?
Yeah, so that would be, you know,
It's right across the street
right,
from.
from Liberty.
So it is.
Okay.
So-
Yeah. Well, listen, this comes down to the majority feels the way it's the way it comes down to. I mean, my argument's a moot point because I get the feeling that 4 of you are opposed to what I'm saying, so I'm good with that. I understand how democracy works.
I just don't think it's a moot point, and I appreciate the sentiment 100%. And I believe best practices should be put in place. But when it comes to regulatory guidelines and the legal aspect, that's where we're having that discussion, but it's definitely not a moot point. Yeah.
So what do we want to do with it? I mean, I can make a motion, but I'm sensing that, except for Commissioner Wentz, everybody would like to get rid of the 1,000 foot, or 500,000 foot. I know that's sure enough, but I'm sensing that. And then possibly keeping the regulations already on page 8 that would make it 400 feet. Is that
Two
right?
times.
2 times the distance.
Right,
Right.
should make it 400 feet.
So in
Which
other
is-
words, taking out that
Right.
letter A paragraph.
So would you eliminate all of 158.059?
Yeah.
That's, so for all 3 types of medical cannabis.
Because it's already
No,
addressed
okay.
previously.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
58.040.
we could-
And then rely on this.
Yes.
all right, I'll make a motion to take out 158.059, about medical cannabis.
Actually, could you specify A, because there's a B, C, and D that you're not looking at?
I like any of them anyway.
Oh, because here all we have is A, so
Right,
I just
because it's
assumed
the
it was
only one that
all
has to do with separation, but there's other
A.
things regarding fencing and lighting
Okay,
that we added in
okay.
that have not been under discussion. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, now we're down to doing it in pieces that we, that's fine.
Okay.
This is so important, I think you're spot on with it. Is there a second to his motion?
I'll second it.
All right, any other discussion on it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Me.
You just say aye.
So duly noted.
Me.
Okay, next topic.
All right, well,
Let's move on.
All right, page 11, nothing.
There could come a day where we
Page
come to
eight.
you and say
So
you
you're
were
keeping,
right.
Are we gonna-
that's why, yeah. that's what
Are we
I
keeping
asked.
page 8? Are we gonna keep
Yeah.
the double distance?
It's already in.
Well, yeah, I know it's already in, so is that. This is already in as well.
That's highlighted.
Can I have a highlighter real quick?
And, yeah, the other thing to point out is, Jay, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's double the distance from school, religious establishment, institution, human care, but it's also any residential lot in a residential district. So that all, an A above, 1, 2, 3, and 4 apply to that, all right? So just keeping that in mind, that's, and the one you just removed did not have the residential restriction, but this one will, so it'll be 400 feet from 1, 2, and 3, and 4, all those ones up there.
So this will actually be more restrictive on residential.
Well, it was already
Okay.
there,
Yeah, that's
so
good.
we just
Yes.
had the conflict in the existing code.
Yeah, so that's
so-
just to make sure you're aware of that,
Okay,
full disclosure.
that's
You
good.
know how I feel about this section.
Is everybody okay with the way it reads?
I am.
I know you are. I know you are.
Yeah,
Is everybody else okay
Yes.
with that?
yes,
I guess that's-
yeah.
all right.
Is that sort of a compromise, if you will? Maybe?
Well,
Well,
A
yeah.
little?
it's in place.
Went from 1,000
I
to
like
400
it,
feet, so,
Yeah.
but also added in residential.
yeah.
Or kept in residential, put it that way.
Okay, now
Okay.
that we've went over that peak of the mountain, where are we now?
Okay, you can jump all the way to page 42.
Wow. We should
See
see
how
what
nice
we're
we
doing.
are?
It's like Candyland or something.
Yeah. That's true.
Shoots and ladder, yes.
That's right, shoots and ladders.
That's probably better than using Candyland for medicinal purposes.
Okay, this is regarding employment campus, and Paige, I don't know if you want to take the lead. Our concept team met last week, and this wasn't something you had brought up, but we kind of discussed as a group the fact that there was no density limitation on either the employment campus residential or the business park residential. And as a group, we agreed that what's currently existing for retirement homes, which is one dwelling unit per 3,000 square feet, and others are the R,
20.
20.
So
That's the-
the area that's highlighted was added.
Yes. So we're proposing as a staff group.
Okay,
that this be
besides
added.
15% of the total area of employment campuses, you also want to talk about
Yes.
the density
Yes.
as well. Why?
Paige, did you want to, it was employment campus?
Well, it was to be consistent too with how the other districts behave with regards to multifamily and age restricted. So that way it was consistent, the same as what we currently have in our code. We weren't changing or deviating from that.
And in case there was a concern that we were
Mhm.
taking an employment district and trying to make it residential.
But you
It
can't
was
exceed
some
over
sort of cap.
15%, right? Is what we're.
Right, but then there's
15%
also
of the
density.
gross area, but
But,
Think of it this way, how much can you pack into that
Yeah.
15,000, 15%?
yeah, but as long as you don't exceed over 15% of the total,
But,
How many stories can you go?
yeah, think of it, there's two
Well, you
things
could
to
go 50
consider
or
with
60
that.
feet.
There's the amount of area, the square footage in a plan view, looking down on it, but then there's also, in a three-dimensional aspect, how many units can you pack into that? So it's not just that plan area, but it's going up too,
The Z value.
all right?
Right.
There's two issues regarding how much residential you can put there.
And it's consistent with the way we do it in the other
Correct.
zones.
This
is
proposal
now
correctly.
Consistent with.
There's your sign about the
Yeah.
decision you made.
somebody would
Yeah,
like more
something got
density.
us.
Just want to make that clear.
here's yours.
Well, this highlighted part would eliminate any like apartment.
But it wouldn't
You can still
eliminate
have that.
a multiple level apartment building. What it's doing is with the 15% you're allowed, and I'm just gonna make up some numbers to make it easy. Say you have a 15% of an area is 100,000 square feet. So how many units can you get in that 100,000 square feet is determined by dividing it by 3,000. And that'll give you the total number of units you can put in that 15%.
So how you want to put that many units in here is up to you. You just can't go beyond the one per 3,000,
Yeah.
whatever it is, 3,000.
So
square
every,
feet.
for
But I
every
could put them
3,000
all
square
off
foot of
like this.
land area you
Up to the
have, you
height
can
limit.
put one,
Right, up to
you
the
can
height
put
limit, but I
one
could
dwelling
do
unit.
that if I wanted to.
Whether it's a
Right.
single
Yeah.
story or
Okay.
Which is
a
60
three-story
feet
apartment
from the
building, It could be either way. It's
Okay.
just that you're limiting it to one dwelling unit for every 3,000 square feet of that 15%. How you lay it out, whether it's single-family, townhomes, or apartment buildings,
Right.
would be up to the developer. But you would be limited, whichever way you developed it, to a certain number of units. And
Is
that's
this,
it.
is this conflicting with any current design or development happening?
This, as it's listed here, would be the same as we do for retirement homes, or any nursing homes, or anything else of that nature. Which, when you really look at those buildings, they're all basically dwelling unit types, and it limits the number of units you're allowed.
So we're basically catching up the definition up with what is already in place.
Well, nothing is in place for employment campus because it's basically a
new.
brand-new
It's brand
district, so.
We're just taking that same way we measure for every other
Okay.
district and putting it in the
But aren't we
employment campus.
dictating kind of what they're gonna put in by limiting this? It should not be up to
What's one of the things, you want to limit the number of residential uses in an employment campus.
Yeah.
You don't want them to just
Overtake.
overtake it, so we've
So you're
limited
missing
to
it. Right.
15% of the land area.
Exactly.
And the number of units is
We
based
finally
on
agreed
that
on something,
land area.
Commissioner.
You're learning.
As written now, there's no limit on the number of units you can put in that 15%. There absolutely is not.
Other than the height
A height,
would eventually catch up with you.
And your square footage that you have available, but there's no other density limit, so.
I think
Height
it's-
and 15%.
part,
Well, if you did just 15%.
15% land use.
How many units high is? Seems like we're getting very restrictive on this.
Well, we're getting restricted in the sense that we want to keep employment campuses as employment campuses.
That's what yeah.
So we want to put limits on the amount of residential that we're allowing, or allowed to be zoned into employment campuses, because,
But the 15% does that.
what?
15% limits
Oh,
this
by
land size, which you
By
put
itself
in.
does that.
And the height, you already limited it. If you're a developer coming in, say you want to put larger homes in there,
So
okay, you
why
get
not just
15% of this
leave it
100
at
acres, that's
15%?
it. If you want to put whatever, that's all you get.
Right, you only get the
Well,
15%.
You only get
But
that
you could-
15%.
So what would a viable alternative be to what you're saying?
Just a simple
Take it out.
15% of the employment campus and a height requirement, that's it.
And no density.
No density.
But would you really want, units as small as 150 square feet, or,
Well, it's-
that's what you could be allowing. I mean, I've seen plans that have.
You can put a minimum limit, but that's
Well,
it.
again, this is consistent with the way we do these multifamily things in other
So you're pushing multifamily units in this employment campus, it couldn't be individual?
No.
No.
Kind
No,
of.
it's the
No,
opposite.
it's the opposite. It's not allowing the tail to wag the dog.
And also an employment campus is designed in a development plan for more green space and,
Right.
Right.
that walking component. And so I think that was something we really looked at as well. Linda and I were
Yeah.
just sitting here doing the math on how many units, 6 units, 6 feet high, or I'm sorry, 60 feet high.
52 units maybe in a building.
Right, on 15% of a parcel, and it could really overtake the employment campus component of it.
But again, the challenge with something like this is the same challenge we had in discussion of hotel and motels. And what is the perception in our minds, what this would look like if we didn't restrict it this way? That we'd have this overcrowded apartment complex put into an employment campus. And that's the threat of that. And we don't want that, is what you're saying.
We'd like to keep the integrity of the campus as an employment campus. It's something we don't have currently, so we're aspiring.
Right.
When if you build a normal residential area, is there a certain percentage of, it's required for sidewalks, streets, parking, all that other stuff? Or is that just,
There is no percentage requirement
Requirement, okay.
for open space or any greenway of that type in any developments, other than clusters.
keep in mind, this is 15% of the total area, so
Yeah.
the total area may not be buildable, but you can count that into into
Right.
the percent, you understand? So some of the areas like you're talking about, the stormwater and the sidewalks and all, you don't have to take them out. You can just take the gross area, 15% of the gross area, and then you can derive your units from that. All right? So that's how you can get a lot more, you know, units, without this restriction in here. You can get a lot more.
I mean, you're conforming this definition to the way we're doing it business now.
Correct.
So you're conforming to our community and our county.
Correct.
I mean,
Yeah.
To what we currently have.
Correct, and that's a good news, you know, to keep, again, how we want Carroll County to look and quality of life, to stay spread out, and which I appreciate, so.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is leave it in. When it comes to public hearing, people can talk about it if they don't like it, if it's in there.
Right.
I don't know what you guys think, but that's what I think.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's
It's right.
consistent with.
Yes,
that-
I think
that-
that's important.
So that's where I'm kind of coming from. I mean, if it was, you know.
If I might, the most recent use of this type of multiplier was Adams Paradise in the election district. They're off of.
Oklahoma.
Yeah, I know,
Right.
and that's the one I'm thinking in my mind,
Yeah.
so,
That's
okay,
what it
That's
is.
the most recent use
Yep.
of it.
okay.
Right.
So it's a pretty, allows a lot of
Right,
units.
Yeah.
right. And then
pretty
that's,
gracious.
that's why I was bringing that initial comment up, so, okay.
It's called Paradise, how that can be.
All right, you want to just go with that? You want to make a decision on that since we? Are
I
you
make the
good?
motion to keep it in, keep the highlighted area in, send it to the public hearing when it goes out, see what happens.
Okay.
I'll second.
It's a long motion, but.
We can get rid of the see what happens part of it.
Okay.
That's
All
a
that-
technical term.
Yeah, look, all those in favor?
Aye.
You good, Dick? Yeah. Any opposed? Okay.
Just for, I don't want to go backwards onto the medical marijuana conversation, but because I asked Mike, I thought it would just let folks know. He said he'll dig deeper, but he believes the legalization bills all appear to be directed to private possession and growing, and limit the amount that can be possessed to 1 ounce, the number of plants to 5, and the age to 21. And that medical marijuana producers remain regulated as such. So,
Yeah.
just a point of
Yeah.
information.
Appreciate it, still don't like it. Don't believe we should have recreational marijuana.
Should run for office and make a stand.
Okay, sorry.
That was close.
Next.
Okay, on page 46 in the use table,
You want to revisit? Can I revisit?
I didn't want to bring it.
the highlighted language is brewery, distillery, and again, the limited distillery and the microbrewery that came out of what you discussed this morning. I didn't know if you wanted to revisit where you're permitting those things. As we originally proposed it, and the planning commission brought it forward, brewery would not be permitted in the C3. But I think as we've learned more about these operations, you might want to reconsider and have that be a C3 use, because a lot of what we actually thought were microbreweries are licensed as breweries with these tap rooms, and they are in larger commercial areas, not the C2, but certainly the C3 would be. And you wouldn't want to have to come back in a year
Right.
and
change
revise
that.
this. So I'm just throwing that out there, that would certainly be up to you, but as originally proposed, we had it prohibited in the C3.
Would you recommend the
So
same
we
for
would just-
distillery?
And the same for distillery, because they're the same type of operation.
So you're saying to make that recommendation, changing C3 allowance for brewery and distillery?
Correct.
To a P.
To a
P.
principal, yeah.
I agree.
Any other discussion on that? Because I agree too. You want to make that a motion?
Sure. Make a motion to change brewery and distillery allowances principal use in C3, as well as I2, I1 and I2.
All in favor? Aye. Okay.
And then at the bottom of the page, the smaller scale, the limited distillery and microbrewery, this is what we had originally proposed, but in planning commission, there was discussion that those might not be appropriate uses in the C1. It came up that, as originally proposed, that was in the C1, and first of all, would you ever really be able to do it? But second of all, is that an appropriate one? So I'm just bringing that forward because it came up at planning commission.
It came up, but did they make a decision, or was it just discussion?
No, they were
No.
only discussing the IR text amendment, so they
Oh,
were
okay.
not.
Okay, all right.
I personally think it should not be in C1. I don't know what you guys think about
Are
that.
bars in C1?
No, distillery,
Distillery and the brewery.
I mean-
No, but he's asking now.
Yes, it would be
Now.
Yes.
I don't, are, now?
Yes.
Yes, they are now.
Well, in the
right?
BNR.
Yeah, the
So what's the
BNR.
difference, whether it's a bar, a lot of
Making
bars are
it.
starting microbreweries
But
and
you
they'll
only have
change
one.
size.
Besides making it a little better.
I don't know what the
Yeah.
the noise and odors and all that stuff are associated with the microbrewery. I don't know, I don't live by one.
Isn't
but I would have
Johansson's a
one too.
microbrewery?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is a concern, because I know that there's, some of those questions came up in Tonytown when they were doing the brewery thing, about the odor thing, because of the
hops.
The
the
hops.
hops that they use, and then, you know, whatever, it goes. As a matter of fact, we had an agricultural area that we had an issue, remember, Tom, where that's what we discovered, that's what was being spread on the fields? Remember that?
Used hops.
Yeah, so,
So,
Soil amendment, it's called
So-
soil amendment.
so the question is, are
yeah,
there,
that.
are there microbreweries currently in C1 locations?
We
right
don't
now?
have any, so.
What will be C1?
What
No,
will
there's
be?
none.
What will be C, you're
No.
right, what will be C1? There are none.
No.
Wouldn't it be difficult to put one in a C1?
Well, think about your rural villages. So you have a lot of C1 properties in a lot of our rural villages. That could be a location.
I got an
for
old
one.
firehouse in downtown Pleasant Valley. Could I
Yeah.
put a brewery in there?
You could, make a little
Good
destination.
idea.
But you could in the future.
In the
Could I
future,
s-
when this is
Could I
adopted.
sell never mind.
So.
Bite your tongue.
And even though the parcels are small, they can be combined under single ownership and, redevelop.
I would like to take the limited distillery and microbrewery out of the C1.
Take it out, altogether, take it out.
Yes, not permitted at all.
Distillery, Mike,
Yes.
limited.
Limited
Or
distillery.
you're talking better than.
'Cause, I mean, like I said, I don't live next to one, I know them, but I do remember driving down the Beltway when, was it Carling Brewery was there, and as you drove by, sometimes the
Mhm.
smell coming from
Oh,
there
yeah.
was not appreciated at all.
Old Black Label was brewed
Yeah,
there.
but you're
Right, and,
talking
yeah, well,
microbrewery.
okay,
Remember
but then if I'm right
Black-
next to that,
Big
is that the same
industrial.
smell I'm getting in my house?
Well, They're
Yeah.
brewing thousands of,
Yeah.
tens of
Yeah.
thousands, yeah, you're brewing.
Right, but the distance
20.
was I was on the Beltway and they were over here, now they're right here and I'm right here.
Would
So
you
just
wanna
because
make-
I'm right next to them, am I gonna get that same odor? I don't know the answer
Keep
to that,
driving.
but I don't want it.
Well, Commissioner, if, I don't know where everybody's going, but you could maybe make it conditional
Yep.
and have the Board of Zoning Appeals
Yeah,
then
there you
determine whether or not those
Somewhere.
issues
Everything's gonna be
exist in
different.
any particular location.
I think
And then
that's
it
a
would
real
still be
good compromise.
permitted, occasionally at least.
If you're in a
Compromise is
rural
good.
village there, you could do it, and
Yes.
maybe nobody's around. and-
Sorry.
Especially in
Right
the
on
rural
air, I think,
villages
but-
where they're more,
No, I'm not for that.
No?
Be-
I-
Just, the Board of Zoning Appeals can make any decision that they would like to in that instance, and
If it's prohibited, they,
if it's prohibited, they cannot.
Correct.
And that's why I like to have it prohibited. That's my feeling.
Because making it
Just look at-
conditional still opens the door.
Right.
Yes,
That's what you're saying.
yes.
I think the door should stay open because there are places and locations within the county that could be C1 and suitable for a microbrewery.
And that would be potentially good for economic development. I like the conditional idea of it.
Well,
Because then the citizens could come out and talk and protest it.
You made a motion, did you?
No.
Okay. I guess I'll make a motion. To changing that P to a C for microbrewery and C1
And distillery.
And
and
distillery.
distillery,
I'll second that.
limited distillery.
Limited distillery,
Correct.
that's the key.
I
Yes.
apologize.
Yeah, the limited.
I
Yes,
apologize,
that's the
the
key.
two bomb, limited distillery, microbrewery, changing from P as in Papa to C as in Charlie and C1.
Okay, I'll second it. And only because, Dennis, I think the limited is where the key here is, because limited really brings you down from what.
It does.
You're
I
kinda
mean, it
talking
is a
about.
compromise.
Right.
I see where it's going, so I'll be okay with
You're good with the democracy thing too, aren't you? All those in favor?
it. I'll vote for it.
Okay.
What about the distillery on C3? Is that not allowed?
No, you just changed that to be allowed.
Yes.
You
Yeah,
just
we just-
changed that a couple decisions
Oh,
ago.
did it?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
Distillery, not a brewery. Distillery.
Both, you
Both.
added distillery
Both.
and brewery both for
I thought it was
C3s.
only
as
one.
permitted.
Sorry.
Yep.
For the record, I will not be patronizing any of these establishments.
Well, you might go for the food or something.
They don't
Yeah,
even
they
exist
have
yet.
good food.
Finger food's good
Yeah.
at those places. I'll buy you a shrimp with
Yeah, ambiance.
wrapped
Or a hot
bacon.
dog.
With a shrimp
All right,
wrapped in bacon.
I'm game, I'll hang out with you. I'll drink some grape juice.
Next.
Okay, page 49 and 50, this is just reconciling, under H, the highlighted, and on the next page, G, the highlighted is for the industrial. That's just reconciling the language you just sent to public hearing on, the text amendment for the IR district.
That's good, we can roll right on through those.
Okay, on page 51, we had talked about the side yard requirements in the industrial district.
How about 50? You have some.
I'm sorry, that's the same issue, it just has to do with the industrial
Okay.
districts. So I'm sorry, I thought you were agreeing
Okay,
above.
okay. I was taking one page at a time.
Sorry.
Hey,
Don't want to overload us.
51.
So at the bottom of page 51 is the side yard requirement of 20 feet. Clay looked into whether or not this was in conflict with the building code. That had come up at the last meeting.
Right. The current code in the industrial district is 30 feet setback. Is a 30-foot setback. So we being the concept team, moved it down to 20. The question came up, why, under the current, why couldn't you take it all the way to 10 and be consistent with the commercial code? Contacted permits and inspections. There is a spacing requirement between buildings. However, dependent on the construction material, depending on the use of the building, so it would depend on how much spacing has to be in between the buildings. So,
Didn't this have to do with the vehicles? The parking in the vehicles?
well, that's one of the,
Turning radiuses?
one of the, we do have, one of the things, what you do see in industrial
Right.
is parking behind the building.
Right.
There is no doubt about it. However, what you could do, you don't have to have access to both sides of the building to the rear. You could squeeze the one and you allow to the other side. So typically, that's where you see, you're right, access. The current is 30. We thought about taking it down to 20. It was actually, no requests came from anybody on the outside. It was more of staff just feeling.
Allowing more flexibility.
Allowing more flexibility.
I think it's a good idea.
Exactly.
To leave it at 20, or,
To 20,
Yeah, but it's a 20.
because it allows that extra.
Well, it allows it,
flexibility,
yeah, it does. We believe it
which
will.
I think's important.
We believe it certainly will. Or we hope it does, I should say
Right.
that.
I agree.
Any need to vote on that one, or just roll?
No.
Good, okay.
Okay, on page 56, the highlighted language was what Commissioner Frazier had questioned last time, and we, as a group, I think we're a little bit confused about how we should change that, given how it's normally measured. It's regarding the siting requirements for adult entertainment businesses. Jay, would you be able to explain this better?
Basically, the
Thank you.
way we currently measure distance requirements is from the structure. If a use has to be 1,000 feet away from a school, it's measured from the structure to the school. That's the way we currently do it, and that's the way we currently do it for residences, cell towers, and every other type of structure.
So it's an instruction to the property line.
Right,
of
to
the
the,
other-
to the, right. It's not from property line to property line.
Okay.
is it from building to building, or from building to property line?
Depending on lot size, if it's under 3 acres, it's to the lot, property line. If it's over 3 acres, it's to the, basically the buildings. But currently, right now, everything in our code, barns, everything is measured from the structure, and that's generally what, where you're measuring everything from for setbacks. Your building setbacks are building, from the building to the property line. The other setbacks are the same way. If it's from a cell tower, has to be 400 feet, it's from the base of the cell tower to 400 feet, whatever is in that area. So it's from the structure.
Just a question. You measure whatever the distance is, and you're 1 foot short.
Get a variance.
Variance.
So is this highlighted paragraph, is it necessary when we already have above it the restrictions? I mean, I'm kind of confused on why we have this.
Well, this is existing language in the code. Everything
Right.
in this whole section is just copied from a different section, relocated.
Okay.
And that's, I think, our question was,
Mm-hmm.
do we need section C at all?
Right, that's what I'm looking at, is why do we have section C if it's already
Do we have some
addressed above?
I
Right.
have no reason, I have no idea why they put it in originally.
Do we
It
have
was done many years ago.
Someplace else in the code, do we have an explanation of how we measure? That this is duplicative of?
have any, but there's a restriction on one to the other.
Or is that just an interpretation, Jay, that you make?
Just check to make sure.
Yeah.
Because maybe it should just be, if you apply the same rubric to all of it, maybe it should be someplace where it's just generic.
Yeah.
When
We
we're,
do have a setback, definition for a setback line, which is a line that is required minimum distance from the street right-of-way line or any other lot line that establishes the area within which a structure must be erected or placed. So that's a definition for a setback line. Don't see anything for strictly a separation distance for, but that's how I would interpret it, it'd be from the structure to whatever needs
So
to be
that
measured.
kind of, that takes care of not having to have something here, right?
Right.
I think it
So
does.
why have this here if you got that?
Right.
Right, that's, I just wanted to make sure before we struck it out that that's what was agreed to last.
I say strike
Yeah,
it then.
take it out.
It's just confusing.
Yeah, I guess if there was going to be a thing, there is a section of 158.040, which is the distance requirements. If there was going to be a way to measure, however, because it's being measured all the same, no matter what it is, just put that in that section if there was some desire to do that.
that seems to make more sense than it being buried in, I mean, I think this is came about probably a little like the medical cannabis, where it was added at some time after, and because that was the conversation they were having
Exactly.
at the time, they put it with that section rather than
Really?
putting it in the more generic section. That's my guess.
I feel sorry for the business that'll open as a strip club, cannabis dispensary, and microbrewery all in one.
Wow.
You'd have a good attorney.
That'd be an interesting business.
So
Wow.
Clay, what
Best
do you,
practice, move to Howard County.
Debauchery.
just for the record, Stacy, you're not working on any? Okay, good. Clay? Clay, what would, your suggestion?
No, I'm
is-
not I'm saying if there were to be one, to put it in that section.
To
I'm
put
not
it
saying
in
there should be one.
158.040.
If there was to be one, I'm not saying there should be one.
Okay.
I'm just saying if there was one, that would be where.
Okay.
It would go.
Yeah,
Well,
but
if
I
that's
do
already
think
there,
In
do
the
we even
distance
need?
requirement.
it's already somewhere, it's
I
already
don't,
somewhere,
I don't
right?
think we need it myself, but,
Is it somewhere?
Take it out.
Yeah, well, it's,
well, it's,
I mean, is it just accepted that's what we do, or is it written down somewhere?
that's our general practice of what we do, we measure from the structure.
Yeah, but I think it should be written down.
A setback line, well, there's two different things. There's a setback line, which is from a structure to a property line.
Right.
But then there's also a separation setback, which is, it has
That's
to be
what we're talking
1,000
about
feet
here.
away from a school. That's not necessarily considered a separation, it has to be separated so far.
And is there,
And that, to me, would be measured the same way as you would a setback line.
Is it defined somewhere?
I can't think of
then I think
anything
we
that
need that.
specifically
Find it
says it.
somewhere is what I'm saying.
so then take Clay's suggestion,
Yeah.
and put it in 158.040,
With some wording.
with
Or
whatever
how
the
it's
wording
measured.
should be,
Everyone knows exactly how
to take care of the whole thing,
There's probably see it.
right?
Yes.
Yep. Makes sense.
So something like C in
Something like C,
158.
yeah, because I think even C has a little, there's an issue with it now that I read it real close, because it says
Business
to the
park.
nearest property line of the lot or use.
Or use.
That's two different things.
Well,
So we have to pick.
Take what our current practice is.
Right.
And put it in 158.040. Whatever you're using currently, Jay, let's word that
Define it.
accordingly and throw it
Yes.
into 040.
It's always better if it's spelled out, if you ask me.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree, Dennis. I think
Something like
that's a
that
good
is,
idea.
Clear to the ambiguity.
everybody understands what it is, yes,
Right.
I do
Yes,
agree.
exactly.
Yeah,
And then autograph it.
okay.
Commissioners, you'll autograph.
You're,
You're gonna
I'm gonna say,
autograph.
I'm not the one
Your autograph
autographing
will be
it.
on all this.
We'll make
I'm
you
just the
sign
first
it.
one word, I'll say.
But for the record, all of it except one section for me, okay? So,
Okay, business park.
Okay, the last,
This is it.
Last minute.
No, oh, okay, almost.
not gonna let it go, we were-
on the very last page, business park, there's several issues with this. Again, for the residential component, we were recommending as a group the same language you just approved for the employment campus that we had that discussion about. Also, Tom brought up last time the fact that there was no phasing component. So that second sentence of the highlighted area was lifted from the employment campus phasing. We decided not to get into specific percentages and things that are different for different properties, and just say that the planning commission shall require phasing of construction, and it would be up to them on a property-specific basis to come up with that. And then you see highlighted above is 20%.
Right.
We just wanted to bring to your attention, the employment campus is 15%. This is 20%, if that caused you any concern for consistency.
Why would this be 20 and the other's 15?
It's a little more here.
It's a great answer.
There actually is a reason. The employment campus is allowed to have 25% of a different use,
Commercial use.
of commercial uses. So that plus the 15 is 40%. This one is allowed to have 20% of industrial uses, so then the 20% here, again, comes out to
So in other words,
40%
you're using 40% as a
Correct.
magic number.
of what is not the
What is
primary
not the
purpose,
primary
yes.
purpose, got it.
But
On both sides.
we just really wanted, as we went
Yeah.
over it, we realized
Hey, there's a reason, I
There's a
appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, it's always good when
Okay.
the back up to something.
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay.
Cool.
And then finally, on page 22, one other thing, just to wrap up.
Oh, that was fine.
You said that was it.
I know,
not
well,
highlighted.
it's not highlighted.
It's a
This
trick.
was not highlighted.
Yeah, put the class.
And this has,
22 of what we just passed here.
correct, yes, 22,
yeah,
which,
it's
oh,
all that
R.
deleted.
It's all the deleted language, 22R, business parks, under the IR zone. We only have one property that has a business park plan on it, and so, just again, the idea with all of the zoning code was to do no harm to the maximum extent possible. And removing this language, you know, we don't want to put that particular property in any jeopardy. So grandfathering properties that have a business park on them as of April 1st, 2019 would be grandfathered in under the existing business park plan that they have. And so where would you suggest, Mary, we put that language, there, or?
I think instead of deleting all this,
Yeah.
I'd have to think about it, but we could leave all this language in under the I-1 district and just say business parks. It wouldn't necessarily grandfather existing things. It would say as approved as of April 1st, 2019, and that would only apply to,
So,
Yeah, one
April
property.
1st, 2019.
Or whatever
is
date.
right around the corner, so you, okay, that's not the date you're saying, or is that the date? I mean,
Well, we only have one approved plan, so if someone doesn't have something in the works now,
Right.
they,
they won't.
right, correct.
I was thinking more when you would be getting ready to
Okay.
take action
Yes.
on this.
Right,
I just-
okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's good.
All right, do you need a
I
yes or
think
no
it would
on
be
the whole
good,
thing?
because what we'd like to do is then go ahead and post this on our website and then prepare for the next phases of this effort, which if we have time, we don't want to meet again, it's up to you all, if you want to go over some of the next steps.
And then you don't have to meet
The
again.
next step.
Then you don't have to meet
This right
again.
here. Yeah, I would like
Put
to
some
know what's
incentive
happening
in it.
next to this.
Yes.
The next step is to go to public hearing.
We can
Well, we got a
Work
couple little
session.
steps in between that we'd like to see happen, just for public outreach.
Okay.
sake.
I think
So-
she don't want to meet us again.
Okay, so,
We'll always meet again.
So what are you saying?
so do you wanna, do
Yes.
you wanna, vote on the package now?
Yes, and everything that was agreed to today, correct.
Killing me here.
To the maximum extent possible.
Okay, so is there a motion to accept the package
As
as
agreed to
decided
today.
upon
Yeah.
with this couple
Tweaks.
tweaks?
I'll make a motion to accept the package as decided upon of the changes that we made today. Well, I don't know about that part yet.
Got a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Reluctantly.
So that's a 5-0.
Yeah, I mean,
So what's the next step, though?
4.5.
No, 5-0.
Okay, so I passed out a couple other sheets. So just a few things to consider as we move to the adoption phase. So what we'd like to do after today is to post the changes on our website and make all of this publicly available. And in order to avoid, and which will always happen, people coming out of the woodwork at the public hearing, but to the maximum extent possible to anticipate any issues with the new version, we'd like to have 2 public outreach meetings that staff will host with regards to the text. And that way, again, just to bring up any issues, and this would not be the public hearing, but we would be taking public comment, coming back to you all prior to the public hearing and say, we've heard a lot about this. And so, do you want to make a change regarding that? So when we get to the public hearing, you know, again, there's always those few people that may not agree with the decision no matter, and you still want to stay the course, and that's their opportunity to voice their opinion. Or you may have wanted to make those changes, and so people that had an issue with something now no longer have that issue, and then here's the public hearing. In order to get that word out, I've put together kind of a bulleted sheet of some things I think that we should be considering moving forward. One of them is to send a letter, which I've included in your handout, as soon as we can, prior to actually the public outreach meetings. Again, so people are notified that their particular property could be affected. So the first wave, and we talked about this months ago about the phasing of things. So this automatic rezoning, comprehensive rezoning, so to speak, would be for properties that already are an existing BNR, BG, IR, and IG, and that have the future land use designation of going to commercial, industrial, or employment campus. For those that aren't currently zoned that, my suggestion is to have another mechanism in place so that way they could come forward comprehensively and request to them be in agreement with the plan. But this does 2 things. We're not rezoning someone from underneath of them. If they're currently zoned residential, they may not be ready to go to a commercial or industrial. So we're gonna let them know that during the next phase, they'll have an opportunity to come forward to be comprehensively rezoned. But we wanna get everyone who is in this kind of commercial industrial employment campus, or they have a conditional use, I should say, that they're already acting in this way, that they're gonna be automatically changed. And they're gonna be notified via this letter. And we can go over what the letter says. And then at the public outreach meetings, we'd have comment cards, we would explain the text, what's being proposed. You know, hopefully concept team members can be there and they can answer questions that the public may have. We'll have a draft map of these locations, and we'll have that interactive map that we showed to you at the end of last year. So that's all ready to go. We can post that on our website. People can understand what their current zoning is, what the future land use designation is, and what they're recommended to move for as far as these new districts.
With all this said, you want to have 2 public hearings,
2 public outreach
2
meetings.
public
Yes.
outreach. I mean, that's at the end, because I'm trying to follow all the things you're sharing. You want to have 2 public outreach. That's kind of where we're at right now.
Yes.
Do you know when you want to have these public outreach?
Well,
where?
it's kind of dependent on today, so try to schedule something maybe the end of March, beginning of April, because we have to get the letters out.
Sure.
And give people
Okay.
notification. So I would say at least in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
For both meetings to be done.
Correct.
Okay.
Just one
To
question.
host them, yeah.
Right, yeah.
You send the letters out, person says, I don't want my zoning changed. What happens with that?
Well, with BNR and BG, they have no choice, because we do not have, we will no longer have those districts. And then the IR, they're going to I1, so essentially they'll be the same with a new name change and maybe some different allowances. And the same thing with IG, they have to go to I2. We're eliminating those districts. So they have to move to that. But if they're currently zoned R20,000, let's just say, and the future plan says they want to be, that they've been moved to C1, that's gonna come forward at another time for them to ask us, to say, hey, we want to be in accordance with our plan. We'll have another opportunity to do that map change for them, and they'll have to come forward and request it. So that way, we're not rezoning them without their permission or without their request. Does that make sense?
If they do go that way, will that change their tax rate?
So that's based on the allowable use of the property, the existing use of the property. Zoning doesn't necessarily change their tax from an SDAT perspective, but it could change other things that I cannot speak
I
to
mean,
with
they
regards to
haven't gone that way, but
financing.
Now your land is not zoned one, now you go to
No.
the next level.
SDAT doesn't assess you based on your,
Zoning.
your zoning, they assess you based on your use of the property.
Use of the property.
So
Just
if
making
you're,
sure.
if you're zoned agricultural and yet there's a resident sitting there.
So there's
that's-
no increase in tax at this point until they activate that and go to the use?
The zoning doesn't change
Yeah.
anything with regard to what their assessment is. period.
Clarification,
Yeah.
that's all.
So it sounds like, again, most of what you're sharing is staff procedures.
Correct.
That's great. And you're doing a great job doing it. What I'm looking for is the next step for us. You
Yep.
want 2 outreach meetings. What other decisions or?
Right, so then
from
after
us?
those outreach meetings, any issues that may come up, we're gonna bring back to you all. So we'll have another one of these, perhaps, or we could even just do it in open session, whatever's easier, depending on the order of magnitude of what we may hear. And then you would make a decision that if that's the text that you want to have a formal public hearing on. And then we would schedule a public hearing, you'd host a public hearing, take formal comment, much like we do for the master plan process. And then at the end, you hold the record open for, your 10 days, and then we'll come back for, like we did today, for the water and sewer master plan, we'll come back, we'll ask for you to adopt the new text. And then under Maryland law, that new text becomes effective 10 days after its adoption.
But we were going to have this text become effective once the on-the-ground rezoning.
Yep, thank you for that clarification,
Please.
yes. Yeah,
Please
gosh,
don't-
thank you, no,
Do
I
it- do it
apologize,
all at
Mary's
once,
correct.
please, not in piecemeal.
So that just gets us through
Please,
the text.
please. I beg you all.
Okay. Okay.
And then we'll come back and talk about the map. This was focusing on trying to get the text adopted.
So our public hearing on this, we'll just sit there and listen to the
Yep.
citizens?
Yes, there's no back and forth or anything. And that's also the reason for the public outreach prior to that, is that we can answer questions at that time to try to clarify things that a public hearing setting would not allow for.
Yes.
We just have to take it.
Yes. Yes.
Welcome to our world.
So
We'll
if
do what we
you,
can to soften the blow.
yes, and that's,
Sit there and smile.
and then the other final issue with that was on the agenda. So if you're agreeable to this, we're gonna go ahead and begin this process then. And then lastly, just for your consideration, and we can talk about this closer to even the adoption of the text, is grandfathering projects in process. There's been some discussion regarding how that would be handled. Some of the idea suggestions we have put out there is, any site plan, or any subdivision plan that is in process, if they want to come forward by a certain date prior to this text becoming effective, then, they would be grandfathered in under the existing zoning. We don't want to penalize anyone who may have spent money, time, energy, preparing a site plan, and then the zoning change, because in Maryland, you don't have rights to that site plan. If the zoning were to change, under Maryland law, you don't have to, acknowledge that site plan. It has to be, shovel-ready, footer in the ground to have that vested right to that particular plan. So again, if someone's working on something, I suggest that they come in now, and we will put that out maybe as part of a press release, if you would all like to grandfather and come in now. We'll work with Clay and Tom's group to say, here's your time frame to come in with any plan, and then after that point, now you're under the new
I mean,
text.
we have a lot of grandfathers on the commission. I think taking care of them would be a good thing. So
Okay.
yes, grandfathering makes sense. And not put
I'm a
on the
grandfather.
landowner. Or just old people. I don't know.
So again, we can make that more formal. I just wanted to bring that to your attention to make sure that everyone was in agreement that that's a appropriate way to move forward, and we'll all work together as we have been to come up with some agreeable language. All right?
That's good. Was I sleeping during the hospital discussion?
No, we kind of went over that. We're good with the hospital. We had a great, we had Clay.
I thought maybe it was when I was out of the room.
Yeah, I know. Good catch on that. It just kind of became irrelevant.
Okay.
We met with the hospital. We had a great meeting with them last week on Friday, and they shared with us a little bit about what some of their future plans were. And everyone was in agreement that when we get to the residential portion, that an overlay district specifically for the hospital would be the most appropriate way to move forward, but still keeping the hospital designation in the C3 district as we have, but for them moving forward, crafting something as an overlay district would be appropriate. So we don't need to address them at this phase of where we are. And I think that was the main concern, is making sure the hospital is where it needed to be.
Good, okay.
They start dispensing medical
Okay.
Well, thank you all for your time. So now we do not need to meet next week, so thank you for your time and patience to
know,
get
just-
that done.
Unless you all want to talk about,
You really want to go there?
Distance from it.
Y'all did great work.
Thank you.
Very, very good work. Appreciate the due diligence on all of your parts.
This team was phenomenal to work with, and we're continuing to work together, so it really has been a team effort, and thank you to Mary for spearheading this and everyone else. It's been really wonderful.
excellent, thank you
Great
all very
job.
much.
Thank you all.
Just to make it official, because this was part of our afternoon session, we didn't adjourn. We typically don't after work session, but we are today. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.